stand up if that's okay. Hopefully you can see a little bit better at the back that way. So my name is Julian Birkinshaw. I'm a fellow here at the British Academy. One of the reasons I'm here is because I'm a fellow here, and I wanted to just acknowledge, if any of you are interested, we are running a big program here called The Future of the Corporation, deliberately very wide-ranging, which is going to cover issues of law and tax and so forth, as well as many, many other issues. There's going to be a call for papers, there's going to be some funding associated with it. I've asked them to put a few materials at the front desk there in case anybody wants to follow up on that. I'm a professor of business at a business school, the London Business School, and so I feel like a little bit of an interloper here. I don't really know that much about tax law and labour law, but I do know a lot about how big companies think about these issues. And just as the previous panel were noting, there's a couple of interesting trends that I would acknowledge. I mean, to some extent, this idea that big companies are outsourcing activities and indeed to both sort of separate freelance companies as well as freelance workers. That's been around forever. Who knows exactly how long, but certainly, back in the 60s and 70s, this was already talked about. The big shift, from my perspective, has been the rise of these so-called platform organizations, the Ubers and the Amazons of this world, who, of course, have created this technology-mediated methodology for linking up work to be done with workers. They are, of course, employing people in the middle of that platform, but in much, much smaller numbers than a traditional employer would. So for me, as I look at this changing landscape, the big change I see is that this is driving the opportunity for doing much more freelance type so-called gig work than before. One of the data points I saw said that 62% of so-called gig economy workers in the UK are relying on some sort of platform for getting their gig-based work. The other point I'd make, just by way of introduction, is, it touches on something that was said earlier, but the heterogeneity here, and the study I read, an RSA study, let me just get the data, it said that roughly 60% of the people in so-called gig economy work in this country are actually at the, shall we say, professional end of the spectrum. So this is lawyers, this is management consultants, this is web designers, this is people who have typically degrees or even advanced degrees, who are very often choosing, because of lifestyle reasons, even for money reasons, to actually work in this way. All the way through what you might call, I think it calls it skilled manual, which might be a plumber or whatever, all the way through to the Uber drivers and the delivery bikers. The delivery bikers and Uber drivers only make up something like 15% of this group. So you're the experts on tax law and employment law, but it's very clear that the definition of what makes a gig economy worker encapsulates a large number of people with very, very different motivations and different skills. And obviously that's one of the challenges here. So I'm not going to say much more apart from to introduce the panel. Let me just make two observations. I think of this as a phenomenon which touches on firm strategy in one place, individual choices around how they manage their careers in another, and then third, of course, the whole issues around public policy. It's very clear to me, as I look at the firms and the individuals who are choosing to take this form of employment or not, that they are worrying a lot about how this is going to evolve. And for firms, of course, they see enormous opportunities for flexibility and creativity and competitiveness by doing this sort of thing. But they also run the risk that they are actually challenging their very raison d'etre. And you can do a very simple thought experiment of if a firm outsources every activity and indeed every employee, at some point there's nothing left, if you see what I mean. And at some point the firm has to say to itself, what is it that makes us exist? And of course, my answer to that is that to some degree it lies in the intangibles around the brand of that firm that draws people to it. And to some degree it also relies on the relationships that that firm, as a disembodied sort of entity, creates with other entities. And my final point is, as I look at the long-term story of evolution here, I've spent a lot of time looking at innovations and work practices within firms. It's quite clear to me that, of course, we have ongoing here institutional innovation in the practices and regulations and rules surrounding firms. And very often what happens is we have this institutional lag where the institutions of capitalism, if you like, have to sort of adjust to catch up with whatever practices we see emerging. And it's very true that the big companies of today are information age companies that bear very little resemblance to what you might call the industrial age companies of 100 years ago. And a lot of the institutions of capitalism, of course, were invented 100 plus years ago. I don't just mean employment law, I mean rules around intellectual property, rules around the nature of the public limited company. All of these institutions support a model of capitalism which is based on a lot of fairly old-fashioned notions of what a firm actually is. And as firms change, so indeed must the rules of capitalism change.